right, so up next we have a session starting in about 5 minutes. We're just going to let everybody settle in. This is returning from last year. We're going to do a very interesting session of the Wheel of Fortune. So what the Wheel of Fortune is actually we're going to have speakers from very diverse business and actually very diverse sectors coming together to share their views on how we can really, what the topic is today, rethinking value. And so what does that mean for our people? What does that mean for our community? What does that mean from different point of views, including financial, philanthropic, manufacturing, corporate? So, yes, I did not make this thing, yeah. Yes, so coming from different point of views to really look at how these different sectors and different areas can be different and how they can be similar. So we'll give it 5 minutes, and I see everybody kind of rolling in here. So, okay, let's get started. Let me introduce our moderator and Wheel of Fortune host, Karen.
Yes, great. Hi everyone, how are you? Welcome to the Changemaker stage. I think some of you spent some time here already in the last 2 days. Have you enjoyed it? Yeah, it's been great. So this is going to be the most fun part of the day. I'm a radio and TV host, and after today I get to say I'm also a game show host, so just call me Vanna White. Is anyone a fan of Wheel of Fortune? Has anybody watched? Yes? Okay. So I want to say to my guests, come on down. That's actually The Price is Right, but I'm going to use all these game show taglines as much as I can. So my guests, my panelists, my contestants, my participants are going to sit under their picture so we don't get confused. And this is a game show. This is better than Wheel of Fortune for them because we will be spinning a wheel, they will be answering questions, but you know in the real Wheel of Fortune there are wedges on the wheel that say bankrupt or lose a turn, but we don't have those on our wheel, so we're pretty kind to them, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, so I want to introduce everyone. First, Dr. Rajeev Chib, who is from Citibank. Anybody heard of Citibank? Good, okay, so I'm going to ask you to sit, Rajeev, and everyone can sit. Pamela Hinton, who is the General Manager from Sustainable Office Solutions. Irene, Executive Director of the ZeShan Foundation, and Olivia Wong, who's from MTR Corporation. Did anybody take the MTR here today? Good. Okay, what I'm going to do is get them just to quickly introduce themselves because we know Citi, we know MTR, but we don't really know Sustainable Office Solutions that well, and we probably don't really know what the ZeShan Foundation does. So I'm going to get each of them just to spend 30 seconds introducing themselves and also why are they here today? What do they want to talk about today? So Rajeev, can we start with you?
Hi, my name is Rajeev Chib. I've been in financial services for 27 and a half years, in Hong Kong for about 15 years, and I've been, fortunate to work for a global multinational firm, and I really think that large corporations have an obligation towards social, environmental impact, and I'm very enthusiastic about that space, representing a large organization such as Citi as well, and also young talent. I think talent is a big part of the growth engine to contributing to sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajeev. So Rajeev is obviously representing the financial system. We're going to move on to Pam next.
Hi, everybody. So SOS is a business that works with corporations to try and determine how unwanted furniture can be sustainably managed. So anytime a client is moving office or renovating, there's typically a huge amount of furniture and equipment that is just dumped. About 4,000 tons every day is dumped in our landfill, and that's just construction waste. So what SOS is trying to do is create a solution that is tangible, it's measurable, and it's immediate. So we can take furniture and divert it through donation, through client reuse, repurposing, upcycling, recycling, and all of that process is documented, and clients get data or a report at the end of a project. So there's quantifiable, measurable results. They understand where the items have gone, who they went to, and what the embodied carbon saving is, and what the tonnage diverted from landfill is. Why we do this? Because it is essential to our survival. It's as simple as that. We are careering towards a path that is pretty unpalatable. We have to take action. We need to reach peak emissions by 2025 and then start improving. So time is of the essence. We can't wait until 2030, 2050 to reach these goals. We need to take action now. So what SOS is trying to do is create a solution that is immediately impactful.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Awesome. So Pam is representing what we call the manufacturing system. Irene.
Hello. So this is Irene from ZeShan Foundation. So we are a family foundation set up by a local family called Chen family. So we are supporting different thematic focuses, including aging well, public health, environment, and moral groups. So we also support things related to sector building. So in fact, we are quite new to environment, so we didn't really branch out to this theme until last year. So we are still in a learning journey. So right now we have a few pilot projects on air pollution, waste management, and things related to young talent development for recycling industry.
Great, thank you, Irene. Irene, of course, representing the philanthropic system. And last but not least, Olivia.
Hi everyone, I'm Olivia and I work for MTR, so I hope all of you know what MTR does. And as a public transport company, naturally we are also low carbon by nature, and I think that's kind of one of the key things in terms of when we look at the environment. And part of our team's responsibility is really to look at the environmental and social impact that we have within a community and what it is that within our power that we can do. But that's my day job. And I also have another part of my job is that it's a privilege for me that I am actually the chair for Habitat for Humanity Hong Kong. And it is an organization that I have passionately worked with for the past 17 years. And I think one of the things that what my purpose, why, I kind of wanted to, I'm really excited aside from because of the game is, so exciting, it's Wheel of Fortune. I think another part of it is really to kind of look at how organizations and NGO, how they can actually partner, because ultimately we all belong to the same community. And I think ultimately that is where that share part of the value comes in. And this is kind of where I like to see how we can explore more.
Lovely, Olivia, and thank you for tying it back to the shared value as well. Okay, so are you guys ready to play? I'm going to come over to this side of the stage because why not? I might as well explore this side of the stage. And I'm going to cue our wheel. There will be 7 spins, 7 segments there. And when the wheel spins and stops, a question will come up and then they will show their answers. So we have... Did we spin already? Okay, we spin. Trade-offs. Trade-offs. Okay, here's the question. You have an opportunity to invest in equipment that improves economic and social returns by 20%, but leads to layoffs of 20% of staff and increases energy use. The impacts will not be publicly known. What are you going to do? So, A, invest in the equipment. B, stick with the status quo. C, buy more time, delay to explore other options and risk losing first mover advantage. All right, what's your answers, guys? Show us. Delay, buy time, don't make a decision, don't be hasty. Okay, that is a tough one. I suppose these decisions aren't made in an instant, so okay, all right, fair enough. All right. Another spin of the wheel. Here we go. Communication. We're in the communication wedge. Okay, here's the question. To demonstrate value to your stakeholders, you'd like to combine rigorous data and human stories. But if you had to choose, which would you pick? A, stories of human impact without data, or B, data on measurable change without stories of human impact? Given how people love data, but storytelling is very powerful, that's a tough one. Okay, what are you choosing, contestants? Stories or data? Rajeev, come on, make up your mind. Okay. Oh, this is not... Can she do both? Is that allowed? Half stories, half data. I don't know. I don't know whether you can have it both ways, Olivia. Okay, she's chosen B, data. It's a tough one. It is a tough one. So we got 2 with stories and 2 with data. Okay, ready for the next spin? Spin away. And we have landed on integration. Okay, let's see our question for integration. Integration. Do you believe sustainability and impact metrics should be standardized and integrated in financial results for listed companies? Yes or no? Yes or no? Oh, okay. We've got 3 yeses and 1 no. All right. Can you see the answers there? Got that all down? This is going to lead to some interesting discussion. Let's spin the wheel again. Here we go. Value. All right. Value. And the question is value. Where do you find the most value is lost in the current mode of working? Is it A, lost talent and knowledge from staff turnover? B, wasted resources not designed for circularity? C, financial risks from undervalued ESG factors? Or D, excessive admin from fragmented reporting burdens? What are your answers? Oh, okay, admin. Not really applicable for you, Irene. Okay.
I mean,
Oh.
my answer is over there.
Oh, okay. What? Okay, so you have to tell us your answer. You get on the mic and tell us what is your answer.
Now?
Yeah, you can tell us now.
Okay, my answer is the total value is lost when we try to monetize the value.
Okay. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Because in my opinion, actually, monetized value, I think it's quite important in commercial world, but in my sector, actually, it's only a small part
Right. Okay.
of the total value because there are so many values cannot be monetized.
Okay, that's true. That's true because you are in a different sector, so slightly different priorities and different values. Okay, very interesting. Let's spin the wheel again. Here we go. Only got 3 sectors left, 3 segments. Stakeholders. Okay, here is our question about stakeholders. Your organization tries to satisfy all its stakeholders, but which stakeholder is the most important? A, investors, B, customers or users, or C, employees? They're all important, aren't they? Ah, okay, so employees for Pam, investors for Irene, and customers and users for Rajeev and Olivia. Interesting, okay. Very good. This is going to have a lot of food for thought for our discussion. Okay, let's spin again. 50-50, pricing or time? Time, here we go. Time. That precious resource. Here's the question. When investing in a new impact initiative, you'd aim to achieve demonstrable results in what time horizon? So A, less than 6 months, B, closer to 1 year, C, 1 to 3 years, or D, more than 3 years. And what is your answer? Okay, we've got, oh wow, Rajeev is in a hurry. Less than 6 months, okay. That's very interesting. So A, B, C, C, okay. Should we just spin it one more time? I know there's only one left. We've got to just do these spins. Why not? Pricing. Okay, so this one is interesting. How much extra are customers prepared to pay for a sustainable product? And for Irene, a slightly different phrasing of this question. How much extra are donors prepared to pay for a sustainable outcome? So either A, 0%, B, 1 to 10%, C, 10 to 20%, or D, 20 to 50%. What is that sustainable product or outcome worth to customers or donors? And your answer is, oh, okay. So quite interesting in the non-profit sector and in your sector, Pam, 20, 50%. So it's worth something to people. Is that all our questions? That's it, okay. Please give our contestants a round of applause for playing so well. Even if sometimes they broke the rules, but it's okay, they don't get kicked out of the game. So I'm going to get all the responses from those answers, and we're going to have a little bit of a discussion. And of course, I want you guys to be involved in the discussion as well. So, thank you. So I've got a set of questions to ask our participants. If you have questions, save them towards the end. We will have time for Q&A, and we'll bring you a mic if there's anything you want to ask them. Please feel free, don't be shy. All right, so my first question is to all of you. Maybe I'll start with Olivia from the far end. Which of these questions was the hardest to answer, and why?
I think the hardest for me was the trade-offs in terms of when we're talking about the efficiency versus human capital. And I think often, that's the part where we're almost equating two effectively, it's like apple and oranges, the way I look at it. That's how we're really comparing. We're almost saying that equipment or hardware are equally important as the sort of software, the human being, the concept of as an individual, different people thinking of a different diverse thoughts that comes up with creative solutions. And so I think, often that's the challenge that many companies tend to, and I can see that especially, say, for example, for organizations that do a lot of work around, in terms of like engineering, that type of work, where it is in some way very black and white. And, in some ways there is a lot of that kind of hardwares and maintenance that goes into it. But I think, but often I suppose if I really have to think about it, you come down and think about it, but who actually are creating all those solutions and hardwares and the processes still is going to be the human beings. But unfortunately, often though, we also have to answer to our shareholders. And I think that's sometimes where I find that to be one of the most difficult questions.
Right, okay. Irene, what about for you? What was the most difficult question for you to answer?
I think for me, it is the question about whether standardization should be applied in listed companies, something like this. I think the reason why I was a bit struggling, I wanted to say yes or no, but I know it was not allowed. So I chose no, because I think that may stir up some confrontation, even discussion, because I understand, for example, when I look around in the past 2 days here, everyone actually is talking about standardization. What may be the better or best standard? So for us in our sector, especially, I think even though in commercial world, I noted that actually we also talk about diversity, even in terms of impact measurement methodologies. So I think the main reason was and is there are so many different contexts, and also so many different types of products and services. And also, if you talk about the listed companies, as far as I understand, many of them actually working in different country contexts. So when you talk about standardization, on the one hand, I know the advantage of having that, because you try to raise this, the so-called standard or the practice. But on the other hand, if you go to another extreme, you actually didn't really take into consideration the specific situation that the company is operating on that note. So that's the reason why I think it may be good to have standards, but not the standard. I think if you try to treat one standard as the standard, that can be very dangerous in the long run.
And in the philanthropic sector, do standards exist?
Actually, as far as I know, in Hong Kong, yes or no, because it depends on what sort of things you're talking about. For example, when the government, Hong Kong government, measures certain kind of social service, they do have the government standard. But whether one NGO has to apply it or not, depending on whether they receive funding from government, right? Because it's the donors requirement. But of course, we also take government standard as consideration. But for example, in our foundation, we may not copy word by word. Maybe in some situation, actually, we try not to use for certain reason. So there are always a reason to use or not one standard. So for us, for example, in view of so many different types of thematic focuses, even for environment, with different organizations working on different issues, we may have tailor-made, actually we have tailor-made measures for impact measurement for every single project. Even though we give out capacity building grant, it depending on the organization's development status, we may apply different dimensions. Maybe the dimension is in big category is the same, but in terms of the measurement, it may be very different, based depending on the baseline normally.
Okay, great, Irene. Pamela, what about you? What was the hardest question to answer?
Yeah, I think for me, maybe the hardest question is where the most value is lost, because it's a really tricky one. I think when you look at the social side of things, so admin, lost workforce, lost engagement, turnover versus financial risk versus resources, I think it's a really, really tricky one to answer. So I answered circularity because I think when you look at maybe across the board, the financial risk versus turnover versus the impact, I feel like staff turnover is maybe in the low trillions of US dollars, what it costs the globe. But when you look at corporate real estate globally, that's worth about $34 trillion US. And that's just corporate real estate. When we think about the wasted resources of energy, transport, operating all of that corporate real estate, that's a huge loss in terms of value, which could be improved.
Yeah.
But it's not an easy answer.
Yeah. Interestingly, that was the question where all of you had a different answer, and actually, Irene, you didn't want to answer it, so it's very telling that. Rajeev, what about for you?
Yeah, just similar to Pamela, I would say value was the one where I kind of struggled a little bit. I think it really does depend on the life cycle of your organization as well. I selected the admin component only because, when we're looking at some of these initiatives across ESG, you have different parts of the businesses at different stages in the life cycle. So again, to kind of your point around standardization, there's a lot of energy that's wasted or spent around administration and just kind of wrapping your head around that. But then I struggled with, I think talent was on there as well. And I think not getting the right talent, whether it's more STEM skills or whether it's more a program manager who can join the dots and actually articulate what truly the problem statement is around measurement or around self-efficacy. I was about to go with talent. So yeah, it really does depend. It's a tough one.
Yeah. For all of you, were there any answers that somebody else gave that surprised you? That you went, oh my God, I can't believe they said that. Yes?
Her yes or no answer really surprised me because I thought MTR should take, for example, the data. Data would be more important in measurement. So that's my misconception, probably.
I think I surprised myself.
In a good way or a bad way?
I was the outlier saying to invest in an impact initiative within 6 months, and I think the rest of them. So I think that really is also, I think at least in the financial services, and I'm sure that's true across industries, is that we're data rich. Data is readily available and can be shared. So I do think that we're sort of in an environment you do have that opportunity to reiterate, recalibrate, and hopefully 6 months is not too short of a time to be able to come up with some meaningful analytics, but at the same time it's not that long either. So that's kind of where my thought process was.
Okay, so what's your reply?
I surprised myself. I mean, I struggle, and that's why I was hoping to cheat a little bit. But I think by nature, if it was a question about what I think, I would absolutely choose human stories. Storytelling, absolutely key. Because I think that's the only way that you can actually have an impact on individuals when you're telling a story. That's what people remember. But then I also have to remember I'm wearing a hat that's actually for corporates. And it is a corporate that, for example, that values data, because we're talking about we have a 99.9% on-time performance. This is what people think about. This is what we have to deliver as an organization. So ultimately, if I simply go and talking about things with only storytelling about human beings on its own, human stories, without any kind of data to back myself up, I find that it's really difficult for not everybody can understand that within organizations. And often what we are thinking about is that we are not only trying to convince people that's like me. We are trying to convince people that are not like me. And so how do you actually go about explaining these kind of concepts so then everybody can kind of get something out of it and so you can kind of move your agenda forward? So yes, I surprised myself because you didn't allow me to cheat. So I have to pick something from a corporate perspective.
I think, Olivia, it's interesting because you tell us how you're a bit conflicted and you know that stories work because stories change people's behavior. And we only have to look at you tell a climate denier, you lay data on them, and they're like, "Yeah, I just don't believe you." But you can tell a personal story, and they might be like, "Wow, okay, I can see how that works." Do you think that in your system, this corporate system, it is changing a bit? That corporations are realizing that we have to have the storytelling to actually make people take action, because data, people just go like, "I'm falling asleep. It's boring. I can't do anything with it."
Yeah, no, I agree. So I think that as the work that we're doing now within our team, we look at both in terms of environmental and social. And so environmental, generally, that's more quantitative. You can actually talk about your carbon emissions. You can talk about the science-based targets, all of these things. But at the end of the day, we also realize that we got to ask ourselves is what is that ultimate impact? So what that I lower our carbon emission? So what that we are a transport company that it's by nature is a low carbon transport company, but ultimately what is the actual impact on an individual, on a human being, on a human level? And so I agree that I think even in areas where people think that it's really more just quantitative, just all about numbers, I think ultimately that human story, that impact that you have on an individual becomes far more prominent, and people will actually remember that more. But again, I got to go back to it's you have to have both. Let's just put it this way: you must have both. I think it will be foolish of me to kind of think that I can simply use human story to convince everybody of what it is that we're trying to achieve without having data to back up what we're saying is true.
Yeah, Rajeev.
No, I agree with what Olivia is saying. I think it's definitely an integration of both. I think there's a third element as well. It's around, I guess, with behavioral finance is what are some of the reward metrics as well? Whether some of the compensation is tied to the behavior as well. And I think, as that evolves, you will also see, a more of a blend between storytelling and data integration as well. Because right now, again, it really depends, in our industry, if the reward system is very data-driven, that's where, the effort is going to be spent. And storytelling will it will go so far. But at the end of the day, I think it's like, how do you monetize, for instance?
Okay, yeah, that's great. Just moving on to another topic now. Irene, we talked a little bit earlier about standardization. I just want to ask also how all of your organizations are changing your value measurements and measurement methods, and how you're bringing others along on that journey. Maybe Pam, do you want to go first?
Okay, so the way we value measurement, it's done in a few ways. I think the data, as we're all saying, is very, very important, but data by itself is nothing unless you provide insight into how that data can be used. So what we're trying to do is document our full process, so we don't just take furniture away and you never hear about it again. We are measuring it, we're documenting it, we're reporting on it, and we're taking that information and then trying to provide insights for the client so they can then make decisions in a better way moving forward. So I think those two things are very important. We're also, on the social side, we're also trying to capture the social impact and measuring that by determining how these items are impacting these organizations. So we're trying to collect information from these organizations and really spread the message about, not just to our clients, but also to the wider community, of items that would typically be thrown away are making huge impacts to different NGOs, schools, universities, churches, that kind of thing. So we're in the beginning stages of that process, but we're also building software that is our own custom software that will streamline that for us. And for every project that we're doing, we're collecting numerous data points about furniture, about corporate real estate, about how clients manage their decommissioning or their reinstatement process. So all of that information is going to be captured in a software program that we're developing, where clients can get really, really valuable insights to then inform their decision-making process.
And Pam, are there any other companies doing exactly what you do, or are you sort of setting the benchmarks?
Yeah, I mean, in simple terms, yes, we are setting the benchmark, I think. There are other companies in the US and in Europe who are collecting furniture and taking it away and donating it. In Asia, there are not many companies that do what we do. I might be biased. I've got an amazing team behind me, but I think that we do a service that is at a higher level and a more professional, comprehensive level than most companies I've heard of, or most people that I know.
So in a way, you can, by setting those benchmarks, then it becomes easier to bring other people along, because you can say we've paved the way by doing all the research, having all the data, having a platform that you can actually be transparent and see it all.
Yeah, I think it's important to take your customers on the journey and realize that we're not perfect, we don't have all the answers, we're learning, we're trying, we're experimenting. It's not ideal, but join us, partner with us. Let's figure this out together. So we're very transparent about what we can do, what we can't do, what we're learning, what we're trying. We're not putting ourselves out there as the be-all, end-all of sustainability. And I think clients appreciate that. And we are vulnerable, we're honest, we're transparent. And I think this is not about a destination, it's about the journey to get to where we need to get.
Yeah. Irene, what are your thoughts on this, on changing value measurement methods?
Actually, I think in our DNA, even though we are relatively smaller family foundation in Hong Kong, we always have the lens of sustainability, even before our grant approval. See, for example, more than 10 years ago, I think we may be one of the very few foundations setting up an endowment fund in China just to support and develop the social work education curriculum with PKU. So this is one example. And 2 years ago, we also set up another global fund in Geneva to support the hepatitis elimination and try to encourage more foundations to join. So that is another approach. So even though I think my colleague is sitting there, maybe she could share a little bit more afterwards. We just approved another grant related to a social business setup So even before the grant approval, we actually took the lessons learned from commercial work. You guys always have rigorous efforts in assessing the operational viability, financial viabilities, etc. So we really engaged one consultant, or actually two different consultants, try to give us a second opinion whether we miss any points when we consider that grants for the social business. So that's also something that I think we learned from the commercial sector, how they do the DD. So the other example is that we also actually, even though I say no standardization at extreme, but we do treasure the data. For example, in one recent project related to measuring the air quality in schools, we partnered with UST, and we actually support the installation of a lot of meters in the school just to measure it. And then through the real-time data analysis, actually we try to engage teachers, students, and scientists to look for not only the air quality and measurement, but we also would like this as a kind of means to stir up more discussion about what can be done better in order to protect our students and children in society, something like this. So I think we try to learn a kind of mix of different types of measurement in order to measure the real target outcomes that we would like to see in the future. So it really depends.
Yeah, okay. Question for Olivia, and Pam, I'll ask you this question as well. Can you give us some examples of underappreciated value and how you've tried to address that? Some examples of underappreciated value and how you've tried to address it.
Underappreciated value. So if I look at it from, say, a corporate perspective, I think some that I think we underappreciate is the not for us. I think we do very well, but I think sometimes we sort of undervalue the passion of our own employees. And what I mean by that is that often as corporates, like we hire employees, we pay them, their salaries, they come to work and that's it. We separate sort of the work life and the personal life. And we almost kind of ignore their whole self, what they actually can bring to work. And what I find that often that where corporates may be missing or undervalue certain opportunities and values is that actually our employees are whole human beings. That when they come to work, they didn't suddenly decide that I'm going to leave my personal self at home, and when I'm at work, I'm one person, and then whereas when I'm home, I'm a very passionate, volunteer, for example, and suddenly at work, I no longer do that. And so I think that one of the things that we undervalue is that as a corporate, and I think that what we need to do is to really harness that opportunity from our own people in terms of what really drives them, what makes them get up every morning, aside from coming and get your paycheck, and saying that what is it that drives them and what it is that as an organization that we can actually offer them and tie that together. So I think some of the things that we do, a couple of weeks ago we launched our Social Inclusion Week, which is really at the end of the day is just part of it is really to bring awareness of the importance of social inclusion, of bringing diverse background of people together. But the other part is really actually recognizing and harnessing, at the end of the day, that our own employees are already very passionate. And many of them are already doing a lot of work, whether it's on their own, in terms of volunteer work, and just kind of bring in other NGOs and other social enterprise that they may not have an opportunity to have, be in touch with, and introduce them to them. And then kind of bring out, that more and saying that, as an organization, we actually encourage you to be your whole self. We want to appreciate you as who you are, not only because you come in and work and get a paycheck, but actually to bring in that other parts of you that we value, that we hope that you can also use that to contribute to the workplace, but also that we will help you to contribute to the community. And I think that part, and more company actually kind of values that, it will actually change the community in such a way that is beyond what we actually see today.
Yeah. Pam, what about you?
Yeah, so I have three examples, and I think it basically all comes down to the fact that we're still very much at the infancy of circularity. And I think the first example I would give is data. I think a lot of companies are still on the mindset of just throwing away furniture. So when they look to companies like SOS, they see us just as an alternative to throwing it away, or just someone who will come and take your furniture away. Where it goes, who it goes to, what the impact is. Some clients get it, but a number of companies still don't value that data and the capturing and the reporting, the marketing, the PR, the staff engagement opportunities.
They just want you to take it away.
They just want you to take it away, like just take it away.
Right.
But the companies who really assess that information and think, wow, like we're going to tell all our staff about this, we're going to put it on LinkedIn, we're going to tell our stakeholders, they realize the huge impact that can have. So that's example number one. Example number two, I think, again, in this infancy stage is experience. The team comes from 30 plus years of experience in this industry from various angles, but we know what clients want. We understand the design and construction industry very well. We understand the challenges that companies are facing, that landlords are facing. So there's a huge amount of experience, not just in the design and construction industry, but we have analysts, we have reporting staff, we have logistics staff, we have a number of different viewpoints, and I think that experience within our business is very, very valuable, possibly undervalued at this point. And then lastly, which kind of taps into that as well, is the R&D. So as a business, because again this is so new and we're investigating the supply chain and really investing huge amounts of time to try and build up and revamp the supply chain in Hong Kong and in Asia. So looking at recyclers, looking at upcyclers, looking at graphic designers and industrial designers, people who can support us in creating pathways for all of this furniture. And I think we will get to a point where that is hugely valued, but at the moment now it tends to be a very simplistic, just take it away.
Right, exactly. I want to ask all of you that question about trade-offs, which you could either make 20% more, but it's going to cost you 20% in layoffs and more money, and all of you chose to delay. Do you think that's a pretty realistic situation that you all face quite often, where you have, here's the scenario, we can do this good thing, but it's going to cost us that? How do you go about that decision making?
Maybe I'll start.
Yeah.
I think you're looking at increasing economic returns, but increasing energy usage, right, and decreasing. So there's energy increase, but there's also economic increase. So I think if you're increasing energy, let's assume that it's not sustainable energy. So that's not a very good thing to increase your energy use. Even with economic returns, it's not great. And then again, you're looking at social impact of 20%, but then you're laying off what I think are the most important stakeholders, and that's your employees. Without your employees, your company cannot exist. So I think if you're creating great social impact, that's awesome. But if you're laying off 20% of your most important stakeholders, you can't survive. So in my opinion, I would say absolutely not. One sort of counteracts the other. So I would delay and wait until something else comes up.
Okay. Rajeev, is that your sort of thinking as well, or?
Yeah, no, I think most of the key points were hit. I think at the end of the day, talent is a new asset class, and I think the cost of getting it wrong, could be massive. And again, energy, as part of the answer, we're not sure what the impact is. But given that this is really a crisis, we're sort of going backwards so really pausing, understanding, and also I think at the same time it really depends. In financial services, again, what does the competitive landscape look like? So the cost of getting it wrong is kind of where I would pause and really go back to the drawing board.
Olivia, do you want to say something?
Yeah, that was the hard one for me, I was saying. But I think that But in the reality, when we think about delay, I don't think that it was. I think in reality we do that. I think one of the reasons is because what we wanted to make sure is that it's not just about if I have increase in terms of efficiencies or economic returns, I can lay off X number of people. Because reality, we really think about it right now, all of us are facing similar things. Technology is the ability to get fewer people to do more things and more accurately. And so we start to ask ourselves, if that is the only measurement that we look at, then effectively all of us are replaceable. None of us actually need to have should have a job. Really,
it can all be replaced by robots.
Exactly.
Yeah, or AI.
So, and we hope that that's not going to be the case. We hope that there's that sort of the nuances of our human brains that make us very unique, each of us. But I think that one of the things that why buying time in some ways it is actually very much a reality is that what you want to make a consideration is not that straight trade-off. Is that if I do want that kind of economic returns and efficiency, that 20% of the staff, what can I do with them? Can I train them, retrain them so that they can do something else? Can I offer them a different opportunity elsewhere with our partners, our business partners, and our suppliers? And you do need to ask those kind of questions before you kind of right away and say, well, I got my efficiencies, now just lay them off. Because honestly, in reality, in an organization, we wouldn't do that. We would really take that time to think about is that what can I actually offer those staff that are being affected. So actually that's a real answer.
Yeah.
So for me, actually, it's not difficult in a way that I think for our work, our sector, most of the stuff might be delayed, except one kind of occasion in times of emergencies.
Right, yes.
So actually, when we discussed this, I thought of one example when I was young. I was working as a disaster management officer in China. So with Oxfam, actually. So if you know Oxfam, they're very good at build up the water supply system quickly. But at that moment, actually, it's in Yunnan, a very mountainous and remote area. So actually, I saw so many victims of disaster actually were hungry, thirsty. So if you remember in those days, more than 20 years ago, I'm talking about, the quickest way actually is to distribute bottled water. And then another second thing is instant noodles. So actually, it's that kind of struggle in your question, increasing so-called social return. So in this occasion, actually saving life. And then actually you're increasing the environmental cost, right? I just put it very simply like this. So in that kind of situation, I think aside from these two dimensions, actually you are talking about life or death. You may not have many choices. So then I may sacrifice environmental costs in those weeks. I just grab whatever we can do, right, to just save people. So I think there are so many situations like that we may have to take some ethical decision, actually.
Yeah.
It is not so much about this value against that.
I think also during the pandemic, single-use everything, masks that are not recyclable, I mean, incredible amounts of backward steps in a way, but in the name of hopefully protecting people.
Yeah, so I think it's always a kind of a dilemma in that kind of situation. But except that, I think we trust that we may have a better choice. That's the reason why we chose to delay, I guess.
Okay. Let's talk a bit about measures of sustainability, because there are, at the moment, lots of different measures. There's no one thing that you can say, oh, I score 25 out of 30, and everybody knows what you mean. It's not like a diamond scale that you've got a VVS 1 diamond, right? So do you think that it's necessary to harmonize the measurement and streamline them so that when we're talking about it, we're all talking about the same thing and we all know exactly what that means? Rajeev, do you want to start?
Yeah, I guess there is benefit in harmonizing to the extent that you can get people on the same level playing field. Some level of efficacy and some common denominator, like a common string that passes through. I do also agree with what was said earlier that, there does need to be a level of bespokeness as well. And it really is customized to the type of business. And I mean, in financial services, if it's a certain type of product or a certain type of client demand, we have to look at it that way, with that lens as well. I do think to some extent as well, if you extend that to reporting, like disclosures, I do also think that there is merit in harmonizing. Again, getting everyone onto the same level playing field, getting that level of sponsorship. Really, if I'm at the board level in a corporate, I think being able to then sort of play ball and also then liaise with other market participants and my competition, there is benefit to harmonizing. But yet again, it does depend. So it's a balancing act. It's like a table that has 3 legs, and if one leg falls, then the whole table falls. So it is a bit of a balancing act, but there is merit in harmonizing.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I would say yes, there is some level of standardization that's needed. I would agree with the other panelists. I think across the board we need to try and standardize reporting to a degree where all major companies have to submit sustainability reports. And I think investors want standardization. They need to understand what a company is doing across the board on sustainability to be able to make investment decisions. Not every company will report on the same thing or will be able to give the same amount of information, but I think standardizing it to a degree is going to be required in the future.
Yeah, I think right now we see is that on the environmental side, there tends to be a lot more standardizations. Part of it because of the sustainability reporting standard that's required. You see that in the stock exchange. You see that, variety of like FTSE for goods, all of that. And I think there is that, and I agree with what Rajeev and Pamela says, you do need to have certain kind of standardizations to sort of know where you are right now. And I think that what would be great, the next one, is actually having more standardizations around the social side of measurement. And that often is where people say, well, it's really difficult, you really can't do it. Well, yes and no. Anything that's difficult, it's probably not everything is worth doing, but some of them, it is probably worth doing, especially when you are adding additional values. And I think that social impact and social value is so key that if you don't have some kind of way of standardizing and measuring it, it is very easy to go the other way. So like people talk about greenwashing, is that other part about the human social washing side, And so I think having those kind of standard, something that it's relatively common, as a starting point. And then hopefully that, we build that sophistication is to know that what it is that we're measuring in order to really add values, social values to the organizations. I think that would be really important. And I think ultimately both for the environmental and social is really about impact measurements. And I agree, yesterday I heard one of the panel talks about impact investment. It is all about measurement, about the impacts that you're actually going to make. And I absolutely agree. And it is not easy, especially for startups. But if you don't do it now, then you're going to have to wait. And well, when is that? Are we going to be ready?
Right, exactly, yeah. Oh, okay, thank you. Okay. No, go ahead, Irene. I'm just getting
I think
some
for me, conceptually speaking, I agree that standardization is necessary for comparison with your own self and with others. But as I mentioned at the very beginning, I think we tend to, in both social and commercial sector, try to look for some quantitative indicators in order to do that kind of practical comparison. But that conceptual limitation we should be all well aware of, because there's so many impacts couldn't be confined by this kind of numbers. You can use it as a kind of reference, but that doesn't mean, or it doesn't equal even to the total value of that particular changes that you guys are making in society with your service products or even our partnership. So I think that awareness should be very important. Otherwise, we would mistake that kind of comparison indicators as the truth. The truth. I mean the total truth. So
Yeah.
that's the point that I would like to make.
Irene, just hold on to the mic there, because there's a question here from an audience member, Jun Hui, which is about how social impacts are measured. What matrix or framework is used at the moment? Does it exist already? Yeah.
In our foundation, you mean?
Or even just in the sector in general?
I think yes. For example, if you talk about quality of life, there are so many different kinds of academic guidelines, framework. Even though when we talk about the operational viability of certain aspect, we also have that, because I study social business as well, so I know there's a lot of framework. So you name it. So that's also one of the reasons why I said that these are very good references, but we must be very careful. I even reminded my colleagues that we must be very careful in application. Whether this full list of indicators applicable to this partner, this project, this country, this district in Hong Kong, something like this, we have to build in that sort of flexibility for the grantee or for the partner to redesign or even change for good reason. I think that's very important in our sector. We would not take so-called standard as the standard. I think that's very important in my opinion. So especially, I think I work on different communities in the past. That's more realistic. And to answer that question, actually, I would like to introduce one methodology that actually I'm trying to learn how to apply in Hong Kong, that I learned from a UN evaluation expert. It is called outcome harvesting.
Outcome
harvesting, that is actually related to your previous question about human stories. So we often would like to see how we document, right, the changes. So we have lots of outcome quantifiable indicators. So I think it's quite common, but we may not pay enough resources to capture all those important stories of changes that your product, your service, or our projects is making in the society. And that actually is quite important, because there are so many descriptive changes that you have to collect from different kind of stakeholders throughout your project cycle in order to know whether your intervention is contributed to that or not, or how. So I think in our sector, we try to learn whether this could be more use, at least, and tell a good stories, actually. So in my opinion, good stories always contain data as well.
Right. Since you mentioned that, this is a great question, which I will finish my questions and we can go to some audience questions. For all of you, what other frameworks or tools or methods can you recommend for others who are trying to, integrate a more holistic value assessment in their organization? Are there ones that you're using, that you're trying out, that you've heard about?
Just one example, kind of following up of what was just said. Another lens is taking a look at, and this is not specific to our segment per se, but just from an employee perspective, the various CSR type of initiatives like corporate social responsibility projects. An example could be where you're given employees half a day off, after a typhoon to go and clean up Lantau Island, which is something that they're very enthusiastic about. And then being able to quantify that through surveys, you obviously pay them a salary. You can quantify it from that perspective, retention. I mean, there are various metrics around that, satisfaction, voice of the employee, etc. So that's something that has been used across market participants in terms of giving that time towards some of these CSR projects, and that's how it gets measured, just from an employee retention perspective.
Olivia?
I think some of the things that we use as well is that you can look at engagement survey score and net promoter score, so that kind of gives you a sense of how engaged your employees are in terms of whether they would recommend their family and friends to come and work for you. It kind of gives you a concept about retention. I think one of the things I find that I think is quite useful is that is actually collecting demographic data. And people kind of wondering, so you do that, right? Well, you may do that for gender, and you may configure out for age, but for a lot in terms of things like sexual orientations, disability, if it's not visible, disabilities, And even in terms of race, for example, for many of these, if you don't ask the questions, you don't know. But often they find it very challenging. It's because for staff, often they're wondering, why are you asking me these questions? And if I tell you, what is going to happen to me? If I tell you that I am a lesbian, does it mean that I'm not going to be promoted anymore? And so what I find interesting is that I would still encourage organizations to do this as using a third party, completely anonymous. And why I think that's important, I think as first it gives you a baseline. And I would argue people say, what if people don't, if you don't force them to answer these questions, then how do you know, what you have? Well, then you've got to ask yourself, if you are throwing out these demographic survey and no one is answering it, or no one identified themselves as LGBTQ+, you got to ask yourself, as an organization, are you inclusive? And so I think those are just some of the other ways of data that you can measure, even at the end of the day, that you actually can't, align it with an individual, but it will gives you an overall sentiment of what your organization is like. And that's another way. It is bringing the quantitative side together with the qualitative side to give you a holistic picture, and if you do this regularly enough, and if you start to try to make changes to the culture within your organizations, and when you get more data coming through every year, it also demonstrates the work that you're doing actually is working. So that could be another measurement.
Yeah, that's great. Pam, what about you?
We're probably a little bit more unstructured than the larger organizations, but I think for us it kind of goes back to documenting the process. So we try and go out and engagement. So we go and speak to the NGOs, we collect information, we understand their needs, we understand what sort of value we can bring, and we're in constant communication with these organizations. So it's not so much a survey or anything kind of formalized, but we have people in our team and all they do is donation and repurposing. So they're constantly speaking to organizations to understand where the pain points are, where the opportunities are, and kind of extracting that information. And then once we donate to those organizations, we go back to our clients and say, this is what we've done. This is what impact you've had. This is maybe how you could do it better. We do that with our team. We're constantly together as a team, understanding where the opportunities are, where we've got challenges, what we can do differently. And the same with our clients. We have really good relationships with our clients, and we're constantly surveying them, I guess, but having kind of really meaningful conversations with our clients, with our partners, trying to understand what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, and where we can collectively uncover value.
Fantastic. All right, I've spoken enough. I'm going to hand the questioning over to you guys. So if anyone in the audience has a question, just raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. We've got a few minutes left before the end of the session, so don't be shy. Any questions? Okay, over there. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Zhen Hui. I actually raised the question about how to measure the social impact. So this is kind of like a follow-up question. So just now, Irene, you mentioned that some of the the criteria you saw from, for example, for the quality of life or operational viability, that kind of criteria when it comes to application and maybe the flexibility side, you may need to consider how to adjust it to be better used in the case of Hong Kong. So I wonder what kind of aspects or elements or factors that you think that will need to adjust when you look at these existing framework from the academic paper, for example. Thank you.
For example, when you talk about just say COVID, for example. So there are so many pandemic related health improvement measurement, right? So if you talk to a doctor, they will say many kinds of clinical data to prove whether someone's well-being is improved. But you can also measure whether the stress level, right? The stress level, the inconvenience, There's so many indicators to to measure whether one measure will improve someone's well-being or not. So, for example, when we do something like distribution of relief supplies, so you may say that, or whether how you can count the number of people benefited, then that's done, right? You can also add it into whether the response time fast enough to that particular setting is critical or not. So it really depends. In some situation, the speed may mean something or may be more critical in order to bring to that level of improvement in one's well-being, really depending on what sort of target outcomes that you're aiming at. If you're aiming at clinical results only, then your measurement can be very different. But if you're talking about, oh, I'm not only concerned about the clinical side, you may also talk about whether someone's emotional well-being. It is also important. Then you may say, oh, someone waiting in the hospital for 5 hours in order to get something is done already, clinical improvement, right? But why? Why we have to design something that lets someone waiting in the hospital for 5 hours? That is really additional emotional stress also. But if you're only looking at the end result, then your measurement will be very different. But if I also talk about the process, as like what Pam just said, then your measurement will be very different. Oh, the process effectiveness or the process results actually, if you count it as important, then you will add another indicator. So that's why I said that it really depends on the target outcome that your intervention would like to look at. So if you ask academic, health expert, a doctor, a nurse, a social worker, they will have all sort of additional input in the total framework. That is how we observe when we do a similar health project inside Home, for example. It's a collaboration with social workers, doctor and nurse, and we were actually quite excited because we found that, okay, actually the measurement indicators are very long if you collaborate together with all these three types of people, because everyone actually, they treasure different types of results in the same project. But that's also what we learned, that it may be good always to take a participatory approach when we design the framework together. I hope I answered your question.
So you mean like in terms of measuring social impact, sometimes you need to, or most of the time you need to be linked to what are the initial goals of such project, and then maybe need to narrow down to certain aspects instead of just putting like all the measurements together to measure.
Yeah, or instead of taking one specific type of guideline, because normally when someone invented something, they have a certain lens. That can be very comprehensive, but they can be also too specific in a way that they narrow down your choices in the end. So you must be very careful about how they come up with that guideline. There is always some sort of assumption behind, in my opinion. So that looking for the assumption or rationale, then you will have a better idea whether this assumption is applicable to your situation.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. We do have to wrap it up because we're out of time, but I want to say a very, very big thank you to our wonderful panelists, Rajeev, Pamela, Irene, and Olivia, for this great sharing and for being great players on the Wheel of Fortune. Thank you, everybody. How about a round of applause for our panel?
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I can get everyone to take a group photo.
Sure. Please be like.
Sorry.
Oh. Shall we split on either side of the wheel? Oh, the card. You want to hold the card up?
That concludes our day for the Changemaker stage today. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. We started with a very interactive morning doing the Human Factor Fresque. And then this afternoon, we went through our different showcase. And thank you to our panelists here for a great Wheel of Fortune, sharing different perspectives from different sectors. So we hope that you'll join us again for 2023. Meanwhile, if you really enjoyed today's interactive workshop, I would really encourage you to drop your card there into the jar, because we will be doing a draw for tickets to our non-conference coming up, which is Creative Collision, which will happen in March 2023. Thank you so much. Thank you again.